Hey, it's Jared. In this video, we're going to take a look at the brand new Google Pixel 10 Pro. I have the XL version, and I'm going to do some comparison tests against the Pixel 9 Pro XL. And I have them both plugged in right here. They're at 100%. I'm going to unplug both of them. We're going to run some benchmark tests because I always run the benchmark test just to see if what is advertised is actually what we're getting. And I know that benchmark tests are just a synthetic test of actual performance, and sometimes your mileage may vary depending on the apps that you use and your actual behavior with the phone. But we're going to go ahead and do a Geekbench 6 CPU test and run that on both of the devices. Now, the reason that I like to do this is because these days we're not seeing massive performance increases in devices. We get numbers like what is being said about the difference between this year and last year is that the Tensor G5 chipset has up to 34% faster performance than last year's G4 and offers 60% stronger TPU for AI tasks. Now, I had some interesting experiences when I was trying to run these tests last night, and that's that the Pixel 10 was struggling to run some of the tests. The app would continuously crash. I was restarting the phone, I was trying different things, and it was overall a bit of a frustrating experience. So often, as I do with devices when I start to get frustrated, is turn it off and turn it back on, maybe put it on the charger overnight, try again the next day. And I have had better experience so far today when running these tests. But is the device that much faster? That's what I really want to know. I've spent the last couple of days with the 10 Pro XL, and to be completely honest, I can't really tell much of a difference between the two devices, especially when looking at it from the outside. It's very hard to tell. But when I'm jumping around between different apps, taking pictures, doing different things, but the only way to tell what phone I'm using is a little bit of differences in the UI with Android 16 on the Pixel 10 versus Android 16 on the Pixel 9. So right here, we're at 36%. This is where the Pixel 10 jumped ahead. Both of them were neck and neck up to 33%. And then the Pixel 10 started to jump ahead just ever so slightly. Both of these devices have 16 gigabytes of RAM. There was no upgrade to the RAM for the Pixel 10. Now, 16 gigs of RAM is pretty decent, so I'm not too frustrated there. 16 gigs is going to be more than enough for most people. With the Pixel 10, they also upped the minimum amount of storage that you could get the phone with, now at 256 gigs of storage compared to what was available last year with the Pixel 9 at 128 gigs. All right, and we have the benchmark finished on the 10 Pro XL. So we have a single core of 2277 and a multi-core of 5991. Looks like we're about done on the 19 as well. And we have 1924 single core and 4539. So we do have a pretty decent performance boost on the Pixel 10 compared to the Pixel 9. So let's go ahead now and run a GPU benchmark. The GPU benchmark is going to be a bit more important for your image processing, and you'll see that kind of performance boost when it comes to gaming. Now, for those of you that are wondering, yes, I am wearing an Apple Watch Ultra. Right now, I'm testing out the beta iOS and Apple Watch OS features that are going to be launched later this month. So as we can see with the GPU, it looks like the Pixel 9 Pro has kind of jumped out a little bit ahead here. Now, I did start these both at the same time. Doesn't necessarily mean they will finish at the same time. And the Pixel 10 Pro XL finishes first here with a GPU OpenCL score of 3057. We have the Pixel 9 still finishing up, and that's really confusing. We have the results of the GPU score of 8380 and 3057. I may have to run those again because this one did finish first, and it should have a much higher score than what we're seeing over here. Now, I am running the GPU benchmark one more time just to make sure, but I'm actually reviewing last night's Geekbench scores when I was running these tests last night. And my Google Pixel 10 Pro XL, I ran OpenCL and got a 3100 score. And the Pixel 9 Pro XL OpenCL score got almost an 8500 for the score. I then tried the Vulkan engine, which is another compute API, and on the Pixel 10 Pro XL, I got 3660. And on the Pixel 9 Pro XL, I got 9,095. So perhaps the first run that we had is actually not inaccurate. And that's kind of unfortunate because that shows that the GPU processing power on the Pixel 10 is quite a bit slower than the Pixel 9. Now, this of course is just a synthetic benchmark. There might be an update that the Geekbench developers have not made to support the actual GPU that is in the Pixel 10 Pro XL, but looking at the amount of updates that the software gets over time, that probably isn't the case. But regardless, it's still pretty interesting that the Pixel 10 Pro XL would get such a low score. But we're not going to stop there. Let's actually jump into 3D Mark, and we're going to run a graphics test on both of these devices. So I'm just going to turn them sideways so that we can see this in real time, and we'll go ahead and hit start on both of these devices. And this is going to run a graphic intense test, and that will let us know whether or not that number that we just saw is really something that we should be concerned with. So far what I'm seeing here in this extreme test is 17, 18 frames per second here, and 14, it just jumped up to 18 here, but this jumped up to 20. So the Pixel 10 Pro XL is definitely rendering faster than the Pixel 9. So whatever we just saw in Geekbench as far as the GPU test, maybe something is amiss there. And that's why it's always good to look at multiple benchmark tests like this, and then also real life experience of using the devices as well, playing some of the games that you use, using the apps that you use, and seeing what kind of performance you get. But if you're like me and you really are just wanting to understand which device is best, you can't simply go off of one benchmark test. You got to try multiple things. And right now, as we can see, we're performing a bit better, and I'm interested to see the actual final score here on this extreme test. And here we have our scores. You can see here on the Pixel 10 Pro XL, we've got almost 3,300. We've got 2,650 here. Average frame rate, almost 20 frames per second here to the almost 16 on the Pixel 9. So we're looking good. Even though the Geekbench score was a little bit concerning, we're looking pretty good. And you can see here, even when it's comparing these devices to other devices, we're still scoring higher on the Pixel 10. Now, another thing that I'm noticing is that the temperature was just a little bit higher on the Pixel 9. And the Pixel 9 has dropped down a little bit in battery compared to the Pixel 10. So both of these phones have 6.8-inch LTPO AMOLED displays with 120 Hz refresh rate. And the Pixel 10 XL has a maximum brightness of 3,300 nits with the XL at 3,000. So the Pixel 10 XL will get just a tad bit brighter, probably not too much to notice. Let's go ahead and pump that up all the way just so that we can take a look and see if we could even notice a difference. I can't really notice much of a difference between the max brightness on either of these devices in this relatively controlled environment here, but anything over 3,000 nits is going to be plenty bright for most situations. Both of these phones have pretty much the exact same dimensions, and I mentioned at the beginning of the video, it was very hard to determine which phone is which. I have the thin-born case on both of these phones here, and you can see the camera module or the camera cluster is just ever so slightly larger on this phone. Now, it's interesting because these cameras are all the same. The rear camera hardware is unchanged with the 50 megapixel wide, 48 megapixel ultra wide, and the 48 megapixel 5x periscope. But the 10 Pro XL gets new AI-driven photo features to improve processing. Now, there's also an interesting thing that I noticed because I had heard both of these have the same exact cameras. But when we open up the cameras, you can see I have 0.5, 1, 2, and on the XL, I have 5 and 10x. And so I could zoom in quite a bit further with the Pixel 10 Pro XL than I can with the 9XL. And the front-facing camera remains the same at 42 megapixels. I've uploaded actual photos taken from both of these phones so that you can see them for yourselves. Check out the link in the description below to the article. Now let's talk charging and battery. The Pixel 10 Pro XL has a slightly larger battery at 5,200 milliamps. The 9XL had 5,060. There's a slight bump in wireless charging performance where we get 39 watts versus the 37 watts, but the true cool factor of the Pixel 10 XL is that it has essentially MagSafe support. Now, they're not going to call it that because that's an Apple thing, but it has MagSafe support, which means if you don't want to use a case like this one that actually has MagSafe support built into it, that's fine because you can attach this right to the back of the phone and it works you don't have to use a case anymore with MagSafe in order to get MagSafe features. So some of the other features of the Pixel 10 XL are that it does come with the latest Android 16. Of course, the Pixel 9 Pro has also been upgraded to Android 16 now. So those are essentially the same, but there are, like I said, little UI differences between the two, but they're very subtle. You can see basically just some rounded corners and maybe just how some of the different toggles work and appear. It's not much of a difference between the two, but it's noticeable if you're coming from a Pixel 9 going to a Pixel 10. Now, my initial impressions of the Pixel 10 Pro XL is that it is just a slight increase in what we already had with the Pixel 9 Pro XL. The phone looks pretty much the same. It performs pretty much the same, with some slight performance differences that you may or may not see in your everyday use. Being that the Pixel 9 gets Android 16 and already had decent performance, it's hard to say whether or not it's worth the upgrade. With the cameras being the same and pretty much everything else being relatively similar, there's not a lot of a reason to upgrade from the 9 to the 10. Now, if you had perhaps a 6 or a 7, then I'd say yes, jump up to the 10. But you can easily find the Pixel 9 Pro XL still available at a discounted rate now that the 10 is available for sale. So the Pixel 10 Pro XL is an incremental upgrade focused on speed, maybe a little bit of charging, and a few new software capabilities that are unique to this phone. But the majority of other features and aspects of the devices are relatively unchanged, and so it's up to you to decide, is it worth the upgrade to go from the 9 to the 10? I definitely don't think it is, but if you have an older device, upgrading to the 10 might be a good option. Just as a last thought, I mean, it is the Pixel 10. Personally, I'm left a little underwhelmed. This is the Pixel 10. It would have been a great opportunity to do something new and exciting, especially considering that Google has been throwing Apple under the bus for not being innovative in their commercials. It would have been great to see something new and exciting for the Pixel 10, but it's simply only an incremental update. Now, I'll be back with a full review of the Pixel 10 XL after I've had a few more weeks of time with it. If there's anything that you'd like to see covered in that video, make sure to let me know down in the comment section below. Well, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for being here. Make sure to click that subscribe button, give the video a thumbs up, and we'll see you back in the next one. Take care.